Enjoy my videos sharing creative sewing inspiration and how-tos.
Hi, I'm Londa Rolfing. I love to create one-of-a-kind garments, then write directions so that you can do the same. Follow along with me at my blog, at my website, my YouTube channel. You could even come and sew with me at my sewing studio in Jackson, Tennessee. Memento Garments, that's the name that I have given to the clothing that I have made from people who've passed on, even from garments from my childhood. Let me show you some of the things that I've made. This was a shirt of my dad's, and here filling in the front is a shirt of my brother's. So you can imagine this is a really special garment. What I did, this was a polo shirt with a collar. It had the tab front on it, so I cut that out. I like informal, asymmetrical balance, so when I cut it out, I tried to make this off-centered, but I didn't get it off-centered enough. So what I did was I added in here in the front with this shirt from my brother. So this is a regular dress shirt, and this is the sport shirt. What I find is really fun is to use original parts of the garments in very unexpected places. Can you find the collar of the polo shirt? Here it is right over here. If you have to go shopping at a thrift store for goodies, then look for shirts that have a contrasting color at the end of the collar. So can you see how I've brought that original collar over to the back? I just think that's fun to use things from the original garments in different places. Here's the tab of the sleeve, and here's the tab of the other sleeve. Look at it also to see the punch of the hand sewing that I did to sew on the black antique buttons. You see how interesting the buttons are? And then I repeated that hand sewing down here at the sleeves. The interesting thing about this garment is that the hem is so irregular. I know my dad had to tuck it in because if my mother had seen that crooked hem on his shirt, she would never have let him out of the house. But I love the fact that it's crooked, and even emphasized that with some side binding. There's a little spot on it, but that spot's precious. Here's another shirt that I made. Now where this one is informal balance because things aren't centered, this one is formal balance, meaning that it's the same on both sides of the center front. Again, you can see what I cut out. And can you see how low you really have to go? One thing that you must do that we'll talk about later is put safety pins at your bust points, because as you design, you really want to know design to have a ladylike look. These garments are not on my body, obviously, so they're fitting a little bit differently. On this one, can you see that I used the collar still up around the neck, but it just hugs the neck and it stands up, and I thought that was a really great idea. When you use the collars, inevitably there's a wear line, so if you just turn it, the back side of the collar will be perfect and look brand new. Binding the edge here and forming the bias fabric trim is a man's tie. And then I have put some yarn over top of it. That's called couching, and I'll show you more how you do that a little bit later. I love to couch. Speaking of couching, you can see even more of it over here on this garment. Before we leave this one, let me point out a few more things. Here at the hems, I've used just a little bit of the tie. And the other thing you need to remember when you're designing is that the wider you make your shoulders look, the tinier the rest of you will look. So keep that in mind. You can see that I pulled this fill-in shirt out over the shoulders. You will have more stuff and more ideas than you should ever put on one garment, I promise you. The other thing that I want to make very clear is that I find it impossible to completely design a garment all at once. And sometimes you have to just kind of let it cook for a while. That's what happened on this purple garment. Here's the collar, and I knew I wanted to use that over the shoulder, but I had also gathered, and that's what you have to do, you just have to go into your stash and gather everything that might work. I had this woven man shirt. I loved the colors, and since God's painted me all light, I thought, well, if I brought that light color down into the garment, that would be good. I even had these pretty pearly type buttons that would connect with this. When I pulled apart the tie Do you see how it started to just gather up? I thought, well, I might use that. So can you see how many ideas you have? Let me talk you through exactly more what I had to let cook for like about a week. I had cut bias strips of that shirt, and I was going to put one along there, and then it was going to come up this way. I had the lighter color buttons, but I just wasn't completely happy with it. So my advice is, if you don't like it while you're designing it, chances are you won't like it once it's done. So you just have to let it cook. I slept on it, and the other thing that you can do is take pictures of it with your camera. That gives you a great bird's eye view. It's so revealing, so keep your camera handy. The other thing is, as you're cutting pieces apart, be sure to have a basket where you put all of the good stuff. I get really messy when I do creative sewing, but you have to have some place where all the important stuff goes, or you'll waste time trying to find it. I actually used 2 men's shirts on this garment. Here's another one. Do you see this was the original tab front of this shirt? And then the collar for that shirt ended up going around to the back. You want to do something on your backs as well as on your fronts, because it just makes it more interesting. If you look real close, you can see the yarn that's couched down here to cover up the edges. The other thing is, when you cut existing garments apart, you want to cut them plenty big. So for example, when I cut off a neckline, I want to leave a seam allowance. When I cut this collar off of this shirt, I left the collar stand. And then that gave me something to sew it on with. I thought that was really neat, the way that came down, and then here's just where the little button is. These are vertical strips of a t-shirt that just roll and make that neat finish. And then I did something at the bottom with the darker color of this ombre shirt. So this one is asymmetrical balance, and this one is formal balance. I tend towards informal balance. You'll find that you either like one or the other. So these are my hints design-wise. Figure out what you like the best, formal or informal balance. Gather everything together that you might want to use. Set aside some time to really enjoy the creative process. And don't feel like you can plan it all out at once, because it really won't work that way. You have to make one decision and then do the stitching or the cutting, commit to that, and then you can go on to the next decision and the next decision. Let's move on to some of the actual construction process of this type of sewing. You also need a dress form, or even a chair sat on a table where you use the back of the chair as your body. You have to be able to stand back and see what it is you're doing. And you also need to keep putting your garment on so that you can see how it's fitting you. Designing flat on a table is going to lead you to putting things out towards the sides that nobody's going to see. So remember to keep trying on your garment. Remember too how important I said it is to mark the bust points. I like to do that with safety pins. This is one of my most favorite new tools. This is design tape, and you can really just play with this to figure out where is it that you're going to actually cut the neckline of your garment. So you're cutting all of this out. Once you cut that out, then you'll have to fill it in with something. It's kind of like putting in a canvas that you're going to add paint to. I hope that makes sense, because you've gathered men's shirts, maybe some fabric from your stash. I'm sure you have from some stash. This black fabric in here definitely came from my stash. You've got to have buttons, you've got to have yarn. This is a complete excuse to gather all kinds of fun stuff. So once you've decided where you're going to actually cut, if this is going to be your finished line, then you wouldn't want to cut right there. You want to cut leaving a seam allowance. Always cut things too big. You can always cut it out deeper, but adding back in is more of a challenge. I generally like to use garments that are at least one size bigger than what I really want myself. So on this shirt, you can see I've cut it apart. I've cut the sleeves out. I've cut the front separate from the back. Now what I've done is I've located where my bust point is on the pattern, and I can see that I have this much extra length and this much extra width. I will leave the length for sure. The width I might just mark, but I will definitely cut the armhole and then recut the sleeves as well, so that I'm taking a shirt that was too big and hanging off the shoulders and giving it a proper fit for my body. So you can see here, I've decided that if I cut out this much, I would just fold the pattern back and cut here. And then from this additional shirt that I went to the local thrift store to buy, this was a little check. And so checks always, and plaids placed on the bias on your body is definitely more attractive with your lines going at angles rather than across and up and down. I have just enough right here that I can fill in. So I'll cut a piece of this out and then sew it in, and now I've got my surface on which I can start to design. At that point, I'll go to the shirts that I have pulled together color-wise. I will start playing with my buttons. I'll consider those extra pieces that I've cut out. The collar, remember, use the wrong side of the collar. It doesn't show the wear. And I can't emphasize enough, I'm going to say it again, you really need to have a basket into which you put those important parts that you cut out. You will have so many ideas, so don't forget your phone. That will help you. And again, if you don't like it when you're designing it, don't do it. It's not worth having to rip it out. I don't like to turn under edges and applique. Instead, I like to put the icing on the cake. I love to couch, C-O-U-C-H. And what that means is to lay down yarns or decorative threads on the surface and then zigzag over them. Next, I'm going to show you how we do that at the sewing machine. Join me for Creative Fashion Sewing, where you'll find oodles of inspiration and detailed how-tos. For a constant stream of sewing fun, follow me and subscribe to my social media channels.